let's get into week number 5. I have 2 quarterbacks and you have 1, so I will kick things off. I'm going to go with Zach Wilson to kick things off, just to make everyone throw up before we really get going here. Look, Wilson looked competent in week 4, against the Chiefs. I sent that tweet out. I said, any Taylor Swift fan who doesn't know anything about football and is just watching because of Taylor Swift thinks that Zach Wilson is better than Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow. You're right. I didn't see that one.
I sent it and I was like, this could be a good. I think it got like 3,500 likes or something like that. Like, it was a decent one. It did well.
Good numbers.
Elon will give me about $3 for it.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah. So Zach Wilson though gets Denver this week. Everyone against Denver has looked competent. You have 4 top 15 performances to start the year against the Denver defense. But let me just read you. You ready for this? I'm going to read you some stats and where they rank in different statistics so far this year. Denver's defense, first in touchdowns allowed, 29th in sack rate, 23rd in pressure rate, 5th in air yards per attempt allowed, 31st in passing EPA per dropback allowed, 30th in rushing yards over expected allowed. I mean, they're horrible. They're absolutely atrocious.
Yeah, they
Justin
are.
Fields, who looked like a CFL quarterback through the first 3 weeks of the season, looked like a stud until maybe the last 10 minutes of that game.
Wait, he didn't look like a pro-ready quarterback for the past 2 years. Okay? Yeah. I mean, at no point.
Let me just just to give you some context about Justin Fields against Denver to show you how bad Denver is. Fields scored like 28 fantasy points this past week, right? He had fewer than 5 rush attempts in that game. He wasn't really doing it with his legs. I mean, he had some rushing yards and stuff, but it wasn't like he went bonkers on the ground. That was the first time in his career where he's had 5 or fewer rush attempts and he scored more than 15 fantasy points.
Wow.
He scored 28. He did all that with his arm because they're that bad defensively.
It was. By the way, Zach Wilson being like kind of okay is going to do more to rattle my worldview than anything else in my life. Like, my dad could like call me and be like, hey, I was thinking more about it, and I think taxes are actually good and they should be raised.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would not rattle my worldview like Zach Wilson being good at quarterback. So this really can't happen for me. But
is it for you because of where you stood with Zach Wilson and the amount of shit you talked about Zach Wilson?
Yes. Okay. I mean, first of all, I can't deal with it because of the receipts online, and secondly, I was just so sure. But you know what it looked like to me, JJ? It looked like a guy who has had the yips for 2.5 years. And on Sunday night against Kansas City, he didn't have the yips. He actually looked somewhat confident. And that rattles me to the core because it's like, wait a second. It was just the yips? It was just a case of a guy not being able to throw the ball to first base? That's it?
See, here's the thing. I'm on the opposite side of this, and I want Zach. I sent the tweet like Zach Wilson is other than you, is everyone's like little brother right now. We went from hating this guy, wishing that he wasn't born, as a sibling, right? And to all of a sudden you've grown and you've seen the little brother struggle a little bit, and you're just like, I just want you to pull through. I just want you to do well.
Yeah. Look, I saw him after the game said, it's my fault, bro. I lost the game, whatever. And I did feel for him in that moment. So I will say that much.
It's not his fault that he got drafted 2nd overall.
No, it's not. It's not.
It's not his fault.
It doesn't make sense. Well, he was tearing apart Arizona Tech or whatever in college. So let's, I don't get it. Why would you draft anybody from the West Coast is my thing. Nobody's serious.
Right. Forget about that guy playing for the Trojans right now. Just ignore that.
That's a red flag for me being from the West Coast. There's no serious football over there.
All right, Denny, why don't you get to your quarterback?
Yeah. Sam Howell. I mean, look, he plays the Bears. So, I mean, it's a great spot. Bears 31st or I should say, they've given up the second most EPA per dropback. Success rate is kind of in the middle of the pack. Sam Howell's not giving you anything with his legs, unfortunately. No design rushes. I think after week 1, so we're not getting that. But I think he's a very, very safe floor option for a Washington offense that was a little bit surprising here. Has the 4th highest pass rate over expected through week 4. So they're establishing the pass, folks, and we like that very much. Nothing downfield, but that's okay. You got to play any breathing, living quarterback against Chicago, and that's what we have here.
I'm going to go. I like all 3 of the options that we have this week at quarterback, honestly. Like, I think Zach Wilson's not like a horrific option. I mean, from the standpoint of like getting 15 fantasy points. Sam Howell, I think, is a good play against Chicago. What about Josh Dobbs, Denny? We need to have a conversation about Josh Dobbs.
I feel like we should have mentioned him last week, honestly.
He is, and he's so easy to root for too. I mean, like, he's just such a fun player. But over his last 3 games, 25, 17, and 23 fantasy points. 2 of those games came against Dallas and San Francisco. He scored 17 and 23 fantasy points against Dallas and San Francisco. I was actually looking at my adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers. And I do this for defenses, right? So I can say this is the 8th most advantageous matchup for a defense, or this is the 5th most, or it's one of the worst. The bottom 2 teams in terms of not being good matchups for fantasy defenses. One of them is Arizona, and the other one is Houston.
Really?
How crazy is that?
Huh?
Like, it's insane. It's crazy, and it's
wow.
The Arizona thing is very clear and obvious. Is that they did not play poorly because it's adjusting for strength of opponent. They did not play poorly against San Francisco and Dallas. And now you look at Dobbs over the last 3 weeks. He's run the ball 3, 6, and 12 times. He's averaged 48 rushing yards per game. That's an extra touchdown plus per game, with his legs. And then obviously that's not even accounting for rushing touchdowns. Cincinnati's defense ranks 1st in air yards per attempt allowed this year. So there's some big play potential. They're not really getting the quarterback either. They're 26th in pressure rate. So Cincinnati, the 8th best matchup in terms of adjusted points allowed to quarterbacks. Josh Dobbs is a fairly legit option this week, especially because there's bye weeks. I'll kick things off, Denny. I'm going to go with Kenny Pickett against Houston. And I got to say, I don't love the play. I don't love Pickett against Houston.
Well,
like if you have to play Pickett, I think that like there's another guy that I'm going to be talking about who I like more than Pickett this week. I'll say that. So the reason I don't love Pickett, but I'm still talking about him because it's rough out there just in general when you look at like the percent roster numbers. Houston's actually been below average as an opponent in adjusted fantasy points allowed. They were a tough opponent from an adjusted fantasy points allowed standpoint last year too. Lamar Jackson, QB set 27 against them. I know there was like some weather and stuff, but then they rushed for a lot of their touchdowns, but QB 27 against them. Anthony Richardson was going to have a big day against them, but then he got hurt. That was fine. And then Trevor Lawrence last week. I mean, it's not like there's been, bulldozing going on when these quarterbacks are facing this Texans defense. And, with the Steelers, one of the big things that we should always be concerned about is that front, their offensive line, protecting Kenny Pickett. Fortunately, they're not going to face, literally weeks 1 and 2, they faced the 2 toughest fronts probably in football, where they went San Francisco and then Cleveland, right? That's not going to happen week in and week out. And we saw them be a lot more competent against Vegas this past week. Still not great, but like at least, a competent can move the ball offense. Houston's actually been 5th in the league so far, according to Next Gen Stats, in pressure rate. So they've actually gotten to the quarterback at a decent clip. That's a little bit concerning. Now, pressure rate, it can alter and change from source to source. And, someone might call it a pressure when you have these mobile quarterbacks and they face Lamar Jackson and Anthony Richardson so far this season. So, you might register some of those like scrambles as like pressures or what have you, but those guys were actually just kind of planning on escaping the pocket quicker than what a general pocket passer would be doing. But I do think that it's noteworthy, right? That Houston's been able to get to the quarterback. So I don't feel unreal about Kenny Pickett because of those few things. Now, they do have the 16th best implied team total on the slate. Like I said, they're not going to play Cleveland and San Francisco every week. So I think that it's a better matchup than those. But I just have a hard time going with Pickett past I haven't done my rankings yet, but I can't imagine he's going to be past like mid QB2, low end QB2 range.
Yeah. I actually think we can't glean much off of any matchup against Cleveland because they've been so good defensively. So yeah, it lightens up for sure. All right. Well, look, Derek Carr is out for a while at least, and that means Jamus Winston gets a revenge game, folks, against the Bucs this week. Expected to start. Obviously, the revenge thing is all I need to say. Really, we could just move on, but I will say a few more things. The Saints are actually 13th in pass rate over expected, which is a bit of a surprise considering how they operated last year. I'm pretty sure that that's not just a Derek Carr thing. That probably will keep up with Winston. In relief of Derek Carr last week, Jameis was actually not like old Jameis, like crazy, turnover plagued Jameis. He had no turnover worthy plays on 17 dropbacks last week against Green Bay. He threw for 101 yards on 6.3 adjusted yards per attempt. So a lot of check downs, a lot of short throws, which is not something we hate overall. This is not a great matchup, but Tampa Bay is a pass funnel, so we have that going for us, which is nice. I think you could do worse than Jameis.
Yeah, I think so too. The other quarterback that I think is, honestly, maybe you disagree, but I think this is the best quarterback streamer of the week. Maybe you disagree.
Wait,
but it's Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, look, the numbers say you're right. So there's
It's really hard to not see this as, number one, a good matchup. He gets the Chargers this week. Nice game environment, 47.5 point over under.
Mm-hmm.
The Chargers have been really bad against wide receivers this year. And obviously that's where Vegas has been funneling their targets. Jacoby Myers and Devontae Adams are basically their whole entire passing offense right now.
Yeah.
And Jimmy G, man, he's been throwing it down the field. He's top 5 so far in the league in air yards per attempt. He's thrown it 15 plus air yards at the second highest rate in football. So I think that combined with the game environment and a potential negative game script for them because they're 6-point underdogs. I like Jimmy G this week from like a streaming perspective. Obviously, I'm not starting him over normal QB1s, but I think I'll have him ranked sort of in that like QB 15 range or so.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy G continues to be an analytics king, which is disturbing on some level because it's just, when you watch, it's not the best watch. That's what I'll say. And if you put any pressure on this guy, it all falls apart.
We should say that he is in concussion protocol right now. So obviously don't play him if he doesn't go.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Oh,
but I believe he suffered it. Like I think he like played through it against Pittsburgh and then is now in protocol. So there's just stuff to follow and monitor moving forward. That was Dusty threw it out there, and yes, he's correct that Jimmy G is in concussion protocol. So just make sure that you're understanding of that.
Oh, that hit late in the game from Fitzpatrick. Yeah. Minka Fitzpatrick. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So my second quarterback is CJ Stroud, getting back to that Steelers Texans game. So only Kirk Cousins has more dropbacks than CJ Stroud through week 3. The volume, I think, should be there as the Texans are underdogs headed into this game. I think the one thing here that could undercut the volume is that Houston is 20th in pass rate over expected. So it doesn't seem like they really want to like air it out, like let it rip no matter what. It seems like if they get a lead, they'll sit on it a little bit, which is not really what we're looking for. Because Stroud gives you nothing on the ground, but enough through the air. Pittsburgh is a slight pass funnel defense, but also through 3 games, it's really hard to say exactly how a defense is going to be attacked going forward. We have a better idea of that, like at the midway point of the season or around there. But Stroud's fine. I think, if you have him in a deep league and you started him last week, just probably keep going with him.
Yeah. And then index of suspicions referencing Andy Dalton if Bryce Young doesn't go. I think Andy Dalton's a good play too from a streaming perspective if Young doesn't go.
Andy Dalton makes that Panthers offense fantasy viable. So please keep starting Andy Dalton.
Yeah, good environment too against Minnesota. So keep an eye on that. We'll add him to the list if we get more word about the Bryce Young stuff.